And good morning. It was a loud reception as thousands of protesters greeted President Trump last night, returning to Trump Tower in Midtown Manhattan for the first time since taking office 8 months ago. Apparently, this went on for hours. This is part of the scene on Fifth Avenue last night, but today is a new day, and the president has a big agenda ahead. As we say good morning from two different towns today, I'm Bill Hemmer live in Washington, D.C. Shannon, how are you? Good morning in New York.
I'm good. It was a noisy night here. Hopefully, it was a little quieter for your sleeping last night in D.C.
This town is empty.
It's very sleepy in Washington right now. The reverse true here in Washington. I'm Shannon Bream. The president's still fending off criticism despite calling out white supremacists by name yesterday. Here's President Trump speaking out about the deadly Charlottesville attack.
Racism is evil, and those who cause violence in its name are criminals and thugs, including the KKK, neo-Nazis, white supremacists, and other hate groups that are repugnant to everything we hold dear as Americans. Those who spread violence in the name of bigotry strike at the very core of America. In times such as these, America has always shown its true character, responding to hate with love, division with unity, and violence with an unwavering resolve for justice.
Well, that from yesterday. David Lee Miller today, now live outside Trump Tower in Midtown Manhattan. We are hearing more CEOs are resigning today from the Economic Council. David Lee, what's happening on that?
That's right, Bill. In total, now 3 CEOs have resigned. And what's notable here is that 2 of the 3 resigned after those remarks you just heard from President Trump. The latest to step down from that council, Brian Krasenich, he's the CEO of Intel. He has called on leaders to condemn white supremacists. In a statement that read in part, he said, quoting, "I resign because I want to make progress, while many in Washington seem more concerned with attacking anyone who disagrees with them." Another CEO who stepped down yesterday, the CEO of Under Armour, Kevin Plank. He also said that he is stepping down because of recent events. He said that his company is involved in innovation in sports, not politics, and he talked of his desire to promote unity, diversity, and inclusion. It was the first CEO to step down that started this controversy, the CEO of Merck Pharmaceutical, Kenneth Frazier. He, by the way, is the only African-American on that council. You might recall, Bill, that 3 other CEOs during the past few months have also stepped down for a variety of other reasons, ranging from things like immigration and climate change. Bill?
Those are massive sanitation trucks behind you for security, David Lee. What is the mood at Trump Tower there?
Indeed, Bill, it's sort of incongruous having this very lavish Trump Tower and outside more than half a dozen garbage trucks, sanitation trucks filled with sand, acting as a security perimeter. Fifth Avenue is open to traffic, but you can see over my shoulder that there are barricades here, not just on Fifth Avenue, but on the nearby streets. Right now, the situation is relatively calm. There are no protesters, but last night it was a very different situation. Take a look at what was recorded last night when the president returned to Trump Tower. There were thousands on the street here to demonstrate against him. They held up signs that said such things as "No Trump, no KKK." Also here, Bill, a number of supporters of the president. They exchanged verbal barbs, but there was no violence. Bill?
Thank you, David Lee. Leading our coverage there on Fifth Avenue, David Lee Miller. Shannon, what's next?
Well, Bill, meanwhile, we're learning a lot more about the suspect in that deadly car attack in Charlottesville. James Fields is accused of ramming his car into a crowd of people, killing one, injuring 19 others at least. He was previously accused of threatening his mother with a knife. Meanwhile, the ACLU is taking a hard stance against the police, who now say they do have some regrets about the events over the weekend.
I certainly have regrets. We lost 3 lives this weekend, a local citizen and 2 fellow officers. We certainly have regrets. It was a tragic, tragic weekend.
Ellison Barber is live in Charlottesville tracking all the latest developments. Good morning, Ellison.
Good morning to you. There's a significant amount of criticism in Charlottesville for the president. City officials and police. The violence this weekend began long before James Fields Jr. allegedly drove a car down this road intentionally, hitting 2 other cars and a group of people who witnesses describe as anti-white nationalists, anti-fascist counter-protesters. Many are now asking why police didn't step in at the first sight of violence. Charlottesville Police Chief Al Thomas is denying rumors that his officers received any orders to stand down.
Did you or the mayor or anyone on the mayor's staff instruct law enforcement not to make an arrest unless approved by the mayor?
No, and I'd like to know who that officer is who allegedly made those remarks. That is simply not true.
A judge denied bail for James Fields Jr., at least until he meets with his court-appointed lawyer. He's charged with second-degree murder and could also face federal charges. The Department of Justice has launched their own civil rights investigation into this incident. Then yesterday, Attorney General Jeff Sessions said that this car attack meets their definition of domestic terrorism. Shannon?
Okay, so Ellison, what more do we know about the suspect, James Fields, and these allegations he may have had a violent past?
He's 20 years old and he's from Ohio. He was working as a security guard there. In a statement, the company that employed him, Securitas, told Fox News, quote, at the time of the incident, he was on previously requested vacation leave. His employment has been terminated. So he worked there for the past few months, starting in 2016 until Monday. Fields was photographed marching with white supremacist groups before the car attack here on 4th Street. Now reports are surfacing in the Washington Post and TMZ that Fields' mother called the police on her teenage son at least twice to say he was threatening or violent towards her. In 2010, his mother reportedly called 911, locked in a bathroom, saying that her son had hit her in the head, covered her mouth because she told him to stop playing video games. Shannon?
All right, Ellison Barber live for us in Charlottesville. Thank you.
Here with more now in Washington. I want to bring in Daniel Harper, contributing editor for the Washington Free Beacon, to talk a lot about this. And Daniel, good morning to you. Good morning. They had a permit. The police knew the date and the time that the event would take place. You can argue the police response, too, as part of this debate as well. And you may not like the message, but the Constitution enables it to be so. Bill McGurn writes this, Wall Street Journal on screen. 3 cheers for the ACLU for defending free speech at the moment it most matters, when it's guaranteed to make you unpopular. What do you think of that?
I think that's true. I mean, I think free speech, I think even hateful speech, that's why you have free speech. That's why you have a First Amendment, of course, is for the unpopular opinion. It's what you need to defend. Obviously, I'm not defending what was said or their beliefs, but they have a right to say it, just as anybody has a right to denounce it and say what they've said is inappropriate and wrong, and they should have different beliefs. And that's American. I mean, that's the right thing.
For 48 hours, it seemed the story was really centered around Donald Trump's response. What did he say? What did he not say? What should he have said? And on and on and on that debate went. It appears now this debate is moving forward on a national level in a much different way. There have been monuments and statues removed in parts of the South and Southeast for months now that have gotten very little attention. And already now we have other cities announcing the removal of statues this week. Baltimore, Maryland's one of them. Jacksonville, Florida is another. Lexington, Kentucky, and then Charleston, West Virginia. And that's just a couple here now. Where does this debate go when you consider Jeff Sessions was just asked about this on Sunday morning when he said this?
My recommendation as Attorney General of the United States is that the cities and counties and states have a right to decide their monuments, and that nobody should use violence to stop them either way.
And you would not advocate that they should take them down?
It's up to them to decide.
It is up to them to decide. Where are you on all this, Daniel?
Yeah, look, this has been an ongoing movement to destroy or to somehow
A plot to blow up a bank thwarted by the U.S. government. 23-year-old Jerry Varnell will be making his first appearance in court after the FBI foiled his alleged plot to detonate a massive bomb near a bank in Oklahoma City.
This was a large bomb. This was a 1,000-pound bomb. If you want to compare it in size, the Oklahoma City bombing was 6,000 pounds. But that's not to minimize the damage that this bomb would have caused to the buildings.
Varnell was arrested and charged after allegedly trying to carry out the attack in a months-long sting operation in which an undercover agent met with him face-to-face. Authorities say they learned of Varnell from an informant who claimed the suspect was angry with the U.S. government.
There doesn't appear to be any indication that, based on what we're hearing, that there will be any missiles attacking in the near future or in the distant future.
So those are officials in Guam now saying there is no sign of an imminent missile strike by North Korea. This as we get new pictures of Kim Jong-un reviewing the plans for the threatened attack. Threat, state media says, will stay idle for now. Ambassador John Bolton, former U.S. Ambassador to the UN, Senior Fellow American Enterprise Institute, Fox News contributor with me in Washington. Good day to you. What's changing?
Well, I think the North Koreans in particular paid attention to what the Chinese said indirectly a few days ago, that if the United States retaliated against a North Korea attack, they would stand back. So in other words, North Korea, if you go after Guam or something else and the U.S. comes after you, you're on your own. I think that had a big impact.
Interesting. That was the piece that said, yeah, exactly. You're on your own. We don't have your back. James Mattis, last evening around 6 o'clock East Coast time, said the following when talking about being provoked if North Korea fires first, and said this.
If they fire at the United States, it could escalate into war very quickly. Yes, that's called war. If they shoot at it. If they do that, then it's game on.
Well, that was a headline. That was pretty obvious.
Well, I think it is a completely correct statement and utterly unremarkable. Maybe only after 8 years of Barack Obama does somebody take notice when the United States says, you know, if we're attacked, actually we're going to retaliate.
You have strong words for James Mattis and Rex Tillerson as well. They did an op-ed piece in the Wall Street Journal yesterday. It ran about 3 pages long. And you took to Twitter, Mr. Ambassador, said the following. If the Mattis-Tillerson op-ed this morning in the Wall Street Journal is actually this administration's policy on North Korea, then the game is over. North Korea will be a full-fledged nuclear weapon state in very short order. Iran will follow. We should not continue 25 years of failed policies under a different slogan. Leave that to President Hillary Clinton. Chance to explain?
Yeah, I'm just appalled at this op-ed. I don't think it represents where President Trump is. You know, ironically, Susan Rice, Barack Obama's national security advisor, wrote and said on talk shows this past weekend that 25 years of policy, including hers and Obama's, was a failure, and that we should now accept a nuclear North Korea. Tillerson and Matterson are saying we're going to take those failed policies and keep pursuing them. I think the legacy of the Trump administration, if that's right, is a nuclear North Korea.
One of the points they made is that we'll negotiate with you, but it has to be under the right terms. You're not for that at all.
Look, Fred Clay, a great scholar and a federal official, once said North Korea is capable of boundless mendacity, and time is not a neutral factor here. Time is an asset for the proliferator. More negotiation with North Korea, I think they'd say bring it on. More time to increase the size and scope of their ballistic missile and nuclear capabilities.
There is also a story out of Iran, quickly. You had the sanctions bill passed on Russia, North Korea, and Iran. And the president of Iran is now threatening to pull out of the nuclear deal within hours if these sanctions are imposed.
Make my day. Look, this deal is not in the best interest of the United States. The Trump administration should have pulled out of it on day one after he was inaugurated. I think that's where the president is. I'm hoping that he will announce U.S. withdrawal soon. This deal is not in America's strategic interest. The Iranians have been violating it. Let's be clear. There is an axis of evil between Iran and North Korea on deliverable nuclear weapons. This is not a George W. Bush metaphor.
Would we lose any oversight in Iran if that deal were nixed?
That is absolutely not the case. The IAEA is actually more restricted now in what it's doing in Iran because of this deal. And in any event, all they're doing is inspecting sites they already know about. The Iranians have consistently refused to allow the IAEA access to military sites where the real work is probably going on. And that is a complete rejection of the Obama-Kerry idea of inspections anytime, anywhere. It's not happening. And it could well be that some of the Iranian program is is under a mountain in North Korea besides that.
Wow, we'll see if he goes through with this threat. Thank you, sir. John Bolton here in Washington, D.C.
Welcome to Washington.
Thank you. Good to be here. Shannon, what's next?
Well, radical Islamic terrorists are issuing new calls to target American commuters. How they're laying out step-by-step guidelines to take down public transportation systems. Former Navy SEAL Rob O'Neill joins us to talk about the latest threats. Plus, a fired Google employee now speaking out. He says he was never told why the tech giant let him go.
People will shame you if you say anything that's not politically correct. But I never realized that it could get so far that they would actually fire me for trying to actually improve Google.
President Trump telling Fox News that he's seriously considering a pardon for the former sheriff Joe Arpaio. Arpaio is a leading opponent of illegal immigration and was found guilty 2 weeks ago of criminal contempt. He was defying a state judge's order to halt traffic stops targeting suspected undocumented immigrants. President Trump said the pardon could happen in the next few days, so we will watch and see if that's the case.
Al-Qaeda's chief bomb maker calling for attacks in the U.S. and Europe, asking followers to target trains, commuter rails, and other forms of public transportation. And the new edition of Al-Qaeda's online propaganda magazine lays out detailed step-by-step instructions, ways to make homemade bombs in order to attack train compartments and cause derailments. Joining me now, Fox News contributor, former Navy SEAL Rob O'Neill, also the author of the new book, The Operator, Firing the Shots That Killed Osama bin Laden and My Years as a SEAL Team Warrior. That sounds like a page turner.
It's a good book, I hope.
You don't say so yourself. Yeah, good for you.
I enjoyed writing it. I'm getting really good feedback from all over the place. A lot of even my mother's liberal friends back home love it that are her age. So that's very nice that people that obviously aren't military age or military in particular, they like the book because it's not about killing bin Laden. It's about a life story of you can do anything you want in life as long as you work hard and avoid negativity.
Well, that's a message that should reach all across the spectrum.
I would hope so.
Okay, we also have a very disturbing message now from Al-Qaeda. And again, you and I were talking in the break about how they don't mind being kind of under the radar with ISIS getting all the headlines, getting all the attention. I mean, meanwhile, they are metastasizing everywhere. And certainly in the publication of this latest magazine, they're not calming down at all.
No, they're not calming down, and they don't mind ISIS, even though their roots are from Al-Qaeda in Iraq. They went on to become ISIS and actually form an Islamic State, which is the first major group of this Wahhabist version of Islam. But Al-Qaeda, if you notice, has been quiet. Let ISIS take the headlines for the lone wolf hits. They don't attack Turkey. Al-Qaeda doesn't because they know that Turkey is a way to get into Europe. It's the same ideology. They still hate us. And they're not upset with things like ISIS, like the Taliban, like North Korea, things like that. They're not unhappy because they're playing the long-term game and they're really looking for the spectacular hits. If you take, for example, it was Al-Qaeda that hit the World Trade Center in 1993. They waited till 2001. They didn't forget it. They said that they were going to come back, and we really didn't take them as seriously as we could have. And we need to maintain vigilance now because they are seeing the success of the lone wolf attacks, realizing with a lot of the public transportation type stuff with the hundreds of thousands of miles of railroad. Right. If they derail a train and all of a sudden people don't want to go on trains anymore, that's going to affect the economy. That's the way we transport a lot of our goods. They start hitting buses like in New York City here. Imagine that, this is where, yes, we will need to step up security and have professionals and have some technology, but people need to be vigilant too and pay attention to who is the actual threat that really wants to kill you. And it's scary, but I mean, the threat's been there, and so far, we're doing a good job, but we only need to be wrong once.
And they only have to be right once. Right. The NYPD has said, listen, we've known about this threat. We are prepared for this. This is not a surprise to us. Yes. But this really specific targeting of public transportation, as you say, buses and trains, they talk about in the magazine how there are so many vulnerabilities because you can't protect thousands and thousands of miles of track, of bus routes. They see vulnerabilities there. They say they want to not only hit the economic interests, which you talked about, but really undermine public security so people are fearful. And that's the whole idea of terrorism.
They want to hit the rings of security and then the transportation. They actually layered it to different ways of who they want to do what. Yeah, we can't put armed guards at every part, but we do have technologies out there. We've got really great companies in the private sector inventing certain radar technologies that I'm not really going to get into that can, I work with a company that actually designs stuff to watch training camps in Somalia, and they just kind of turn on when they show up. They can put stuff like this in different places to guard everything from nuclear sites to sporting events to railroad tracks. We will need that. And yeah, New York's great. I mean, the cops here, they're ready for it. One of the few places in the country that hasn't forgotten. You know, I always say that the problem is people keep forgetting to never forget. Right here in New York, they never forget. So the cops here are good, but we're worried about other major cities where maybe like San Francisco, where they think, you know, they don't really hate us. They just hate the right wing. I'd be worried about that. There's trolleys there. There's public transportation. And there's a lot of people there, too. So, again, vigilance of the realization of not a politically correct threat, but of an actual threat of people who want to kill you because they don't like us. And, I mean, we were even talking in the break about how in this article, because it was written when President Obama was there, it was talking about how multiculturalism and how we support the gay community and how they hate that because that's not the way we work, you know. Again, if there's any way to unify us, I hope this could be something, especially in light of recent events, that, you know, we do disagree as a country, but we should be United States.
Yeah, because, as you said, the attack that they laid out on us does go across the political spectrum. They hate everything that freedom and democracy represents.
That is one thing we have in common. They hate us all.
Yeah, okay. Well, if that can't be a uniting factor, I don't know what can. Rob, good to see you.
Good to see you too, Shannon. Thanks.
Shannon, thank you. 29 past. President Trump speaking out about a brand new report that claims the Obama administration was warned 3 years ago about Russia's intent to disrupt elections and yet did nothing about it. We'll dig into that report, see what we can find out in a moment. Plus, new calls for the president to fire Chief Strategist Steve Bannon. How real are those calls? Could he be the next to go? The president's also speaking out again against hate groups after the violence in Charlottesville, Virginia. Why it still is not enough for some of his critics.
Where does it stop? And I think that this whole effort on the left, they're going to have a run right now that is emotional, destructive, and wrong. It is anti-American. It is anti-American history.
Racism is evil, and those who cause violence in its name are criminals and thugs, including the KKK, neo-Nazis, white supremacists, and other hate groups that are repugnant to everything we hold dear as Americans.
President Trump doubling down against hate groups as critics continue to blast him over his response to the violence in Virginia over the weekend. The president later tweeting made additional remarks on Charlottesville and realized once again that the fake news media will never be satisfied. Truly bad people. Joining me now, good people, Rich Lowry, editor of the National Review and Fox News contributor, and Juan Williams, Fox News political analyst and co-host of The Five. Good to see you both.
Good morning.
All right. Juan, how does this sit with you now? I mean, two statements, the second much more detailed. Does it close the loop for you?
No, I mean, obviously, I think it was a good statement that he made yesterday. But again, yesterday was Monday. The events took place on Saturday, Shannon, and I think that's when there was a real absence of authority from the Oval Office. The idea that the President of the United States would speak on this and make sort of a false equivalence, like all sides, many sides are to blame here, rather than to call out the white supremacist movement, seemed to me to be a major failure. And I think that's why you've seen it's not only fake news media, but you've seen Republicans, strong Republicans, people you would not say are, oh, they're kind of moderate Republicans. I'm talking about Orrin Hatch. I'm talking about people like Cory Gardner, Colorado, who said, you know what, let's just say that white racism is a problem here and we're not going to tolerate it.
All right, Rich, was it a missed opportunity? Although it's important to note there was violence on all sides. I don't, you know, we think we know who started it, and we'd agree there are a lot of bad people involved.
Right. Look, this statement was too late. He should have been much more specific right at the beginning. At National Review, we ran an editorial saying come out and specifically denounce these white supremacists, and he did it yesterday. So at a certain level, you have to take yes for an answer. This is a very good and strong statement. And also, this issue of both sides, there was violence on both sides. Now, it doesn't make the neo-Nazis any better or any less evil, but the fact is there is a movement on the left that is violent and hateful in its own right, and I think people of goodwill on both sides should denounce violence in all its forms.
All right, I want to play a little bit of what former House Speaker Newt Gingrich had to say about whether the president's ever going to get any credit on this topic or anything else.
He said every single thing that his critics on the left want. So now you have crowds who are saying we didn't say it soon enough. I just want to suggest to you there's an anti-Trump movement in this country that will never, ever be satisfied as long as he's president. And at some point we have to understand his concern about violence on the left is real.
Okay, you think that's fair, Juan? There's some people that this president's never going to win them over. They're always going to be critics.
Oh, sure. And, I mean, let's look at the reality. Right now, I think his numbers are in the mid-30s, so there are a lot of critics out there. So Newt Gingrich is right. There's some people who won't be satisfied. That's not a response to what happened on Saturday. That's almost a distraction from the fact that, the president had some might say a hiccup, some might say a moral failure. I don't know how you want to judge it, but something went wrong there. And you can't distract from that given the fact that he has many critics.
Yeah, and Rich, this kind of highlights the fact as well that this White House can't make any mistakes because misstep, mistake, whatever you want to call anything that they choose to do, there are those who are ready to pounce and be critical even when the intentions are good.
Yeah, well, there's some supporters of the president who will conclude from the absolutely true fact that there are anti-Trump people out there who will never be satisfied and criticize everything that he'll do, and they conclude from that, well, the president then just shouldn't even try. But he shouldn't give them more fodder. It would have been better for him and for the country and for everyone if he had been much stronger on Saturday. And it's much better to go when you make a mistake and you flub it to correct it. And there were some reports that Trump was sort of resistant to admitting error implicitly by going out yesterday, but it was better that he did it. So be the best president you can, realize it's never going to satisfy everyone.
Juan, where do we go from here? I mean, what could this president, this administration do to contribute to having honest conversations about these issues, to bringing about some healing? I mean, he talks a lot and he tweets a lot about we're better as Americans when we're united across race, religion, creeds, everything else. But what more would you like to see from him?
Well, I think that this is a very difficult issue for the president because if you recall, he's attached to the birther movement coming up with the Mexicans and immigrants, rapists and murders and all that. There's a lot of backdrop here. The Muslims are all bad. It just becomes at some point like a snowball. It gets big. And so how do you achieve healing that you're talking about, Shannon? And I think for this president, much of it has to do with talking to his fellow Republicans and the people who supported him and saying very clearly, listen, you know what? We love our country. We're patriots. We have a strong conservative position, but we're not hateful people, and we're not going to welcome hateful people into our ranks. I think we've seen that from other presidents and other Republicans. And I just look back to George H.W. Bush. I look back to people who said, you know what? I think it was Bob Dole at the convention in '96 who said, you know what? If you're a hateful person, the exit's right there.
All right. Well, and to be fair, he has differentiated, Rich, on these issues of specifically referring to certain Mexicans, certain Muslims. I mean, that gets lost in translation, though, when people hear the bigger headline, just that they consider that you're a bigot or you're a hateful person, even if you've got some nuance to that and you've made some clarifications.
Yeah, well, at its best, the Trump-style nationalism should be unifying. And he's at his strongest in these moments when he talks about we all love the same flag. We all love the same country, and we're unified on that. And I think he should put much more emphasis on that theme, maybe just give an entire speech devoted to that theme.
Well, we'll see. We'll see if he's listening and takes your advice, gentlemen. Juan Williams, Rich Lowry, always good to see you both.
Thank you, Shannon.
Good stuff. Thank you, Shannon. California now. Leaders in that state pushing back against the Trump team in the fight over sanctuary cities. The state filing a lawsuit together with the city of San Francisco. State Attorney General Xavier Becerra, saying that the president's vow to end funding for sanctuary cities is bullying and would violate the rights of California residents.
It is hard to believe that now that the federal government would try to jeopardize those crime-fighting funds simply because it wishes to pressure local governments to do their bidding on federal immigration law.
So now the lawsuits also challenge new conditions that give federal officials access to local jails to question suspected illegal immigrants. Shannon.
Well, another big story we are watching this morning. The fight for Jeff Sessions' seat in Alabama unfolds today.
Since I took Jeff Sessions' place in February, I've done everything you could possibly do to support the president's agenda. And believe me, that's what the people of Alabama want to see.
Senator Luther Strange getting support from both the president and Mitch McConnell, but some conservatives say he's actually too much a part of the swamp. So what will the election tell us? And a strange malfunction causing a huge mess at an airport. Check it out. That story's next. A malfunction at an airport in Maine, filling a building with foam and leaving 4 people trapped inside. It happened at the Lufthansa hangar at Auburn-Lewiston Municipal Airport yesterday. Firefighters say there was an error with a fire suppression system that set off all that foam. Crews did quickly find the people who were trapped. Local media outlets say 2 of them were hospitalized after inhaling the substance, but they're expected to be okay.
President Trump's endorsement will be incredibly important because people want his agenda passed. I want his agenda passed, and I couldn't be more honored that he has given me his endorsement and full support.
That is Luther Strange. All eyes in the state of Alabama today. Voters head to the poll for a special Republican primary. The vacant seat left by Attorney General Jeff Sessions is now up for grabs. And with this race testing the reach of the president, the reach of Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell, who both have endorsed Luther Strange. My guest now, President of the Senate Leadership Fund and former Chief of Staff to Mitch McConnell, Stephen Law, in studio. And nice to see you.
Nice to see you, too.
What do you think this election means right now, not knowing clearly the outcome?
Well, obviously, the election result will tell us a lot. Right now, we're just guessing, obviously, but I think it's going to be a major test of the power of Donald Trump's endorsement. He came in somewhat late, endorsed Luther Strange at a point where Luther Strange was well behind Roy Moore. We think that Luther Strange is surging, probably pulled even with Roy Moore, and will definitely be in a runoff with Moore as a result of the president's endorsement.
Right now, it's a tight race, right?
Right.
Would you you would concede that?
Absolutely.
And if you don't get to 50%, there's going to be a runoff in September.
That's correct, yeah.
All right. Now, does Mitch McConnell help Luther Strange in Alabama?
Certainly his group is helping Luther Strange a great deal. We've been in there mostly talking about Mo Brooks, but then in the last week we've been spending a lot of time talking about Luther Strange and Donald Trump's endorsement of him, and we hope that helps push him across the finish line.
Which is my next question. How much of an endorsement does Donald Trump do for Luther Strange?
Well, if Alabama voters know about it, and I think they're going to know about it, both with our advertising and with what the president is doing himself, it's a huge impact. Donald Trump is very popular in the South. In Alabama, in our last poll, Donald Trump had an 85% approval rating among primary voters, so I'd say he packs a big wallop in that state.
Right. Here's where things get a little confusing, and I don't want to say squishy, but maybe squishy too politically as well. The president tweeted this a bit earlier today on screen. Big day in Alabama. Vote for Luther Strange. He will be great. In the meantime, here's a political ad from Mo Brooks as well that runs the following way.
They fight to keep the 60% rule that kills your agenda. I sure don't. McConnell and Strange are weak, but together we can be strong.
That's the guy who's also driving around the state in a bus that says "Drain the Swamp Express."
Right.
That's a Trump message.
Well, Mo Brooks is in a very tough spot because all during the presidential campaign last year, he was strongly anti-Trump. He's been anti-Trump at different points of this campaign as well, and that's a really tough problem that Mo Brooks has. So the only thing that he can do is to go after Senator McConnell. We think that it's not going to play. We think that that's not a message that will resonate with Alabama voters. They're going to be very interested in who their president supports and the fact that Luther Strange is on the president's side.
Things get even murkier now. Mark Levin, a radio host, tweeted the following. Here's hoping Mo Brooks supporters in Alabama turn out in large numbers to vote today and defeat McConnell's lapdog, Luther Strange. How are Republican voters expected to understand this?
Well, I think voters sort it out. They almost always do in every election, and they usually kind of look at the most critical issues that matter to them. They care about their president. They care about who he supports and who supports him, and that's Luther Strange. Mo Brooks and his allies have focused a whole lot on Mitch McConnell, and we think that it just reflects the fact that they have a very beltway mentality that is not going to resonate with Alabama voters and what they care about.
Roy Moore is the Alabama Chief Justice who made a lot of headlines 10 years ago on the Ten Commandments. And that was an issue that Southern conservatives rallied around. Does he have much hope of winning today?
Well, he will almost certainly be in the runoff if Luther Strange doesn't get to 50%, and we think it'll probably be a runoff. He's not currently the Chief Justice. He lost his job. He's actually lost it twice. But you're right. He does have a base of support that is significant in the state, but we also think that he's probably hit a ceiling. His numbers have hardly changed at all over the last few weeks, and we think that reflects the fact that all of the vote share that he's gotten is what he's going to get, and he's not going to be able to build enough so that if he's running against Luther Strange, Strange in the runoff will be successful.
Give me a sense overall for how folks in Alabama who were on board the Trump train early, when you think about Jeff Sessions, when you think about that overwhelming primary victory that the president won in Alabama early on during the campaign, are they still with him? And if so, by how much?
They're very much with him. We polled a lot during this whole campaign, and they're sticking with their man. They like him. They like what he stands for. They don't like every single thing that he does, and they were a little bit nervous about what the fight that he had for a little bit with his Attorney General, the beloved Jeff Sessions, who's also admired a great deal in the state. But they're very strongly with him. They like the fact that Luther Strange was consistently with him all throughout, and they really don't like the fact that Mo Brooks was a fair-weather friend. In fact, mostly an enemy, and that has only recently tried to ally himself with
If you've polled on this, then just to nail down a number, if they were 90% before with him, what are they now with him?
Yeah, no, they're between 85 and 90% are supportive of him among Republican primary voters. We didn't test the whole state, but among Republican primary voters, they're standing with Trump.
We shall see. They're voting in Alabama. Stephen Law, thank you for your time.
Thanks, so.
Great to see you in person.
Great to see you, too.
All right. Shannon, what's next?
Well, Tiger Woods arrested and charged for DUI back in May. We are learning now more about what was in his system when he got behind the wheel. That report is next. Plus, Taylor Swift winning her countersuit against a former radio host who she accused of groping her 4 years ago. Why the pop star says this is about much more than just her.
But somebody we all know has now stood up and said this is where the line is. It gives courage and inspiration to all people, not just women, but to all people.
5 different drugs. That's what was reportedly in Tiger Woods' system when he was arrested for driving under the influence in May. Among the substances, painkillers, sleep aids, and THC. It is not clear if Woods was prescribed all of those drugs, but we do know he completed treatment at a clinic shortly after the incident. He's made a statement and believes that he right now is on target, on the mend for his back issue that has been, well, quite an issue for several years.
A Denver jury ruling in favor of pop star Taylor Swift in her countersuit against former radio host David Mueller. Swift accused Mueller of groping her at a meet and greet way back in 2013. Alicia Acuna is live in Denver with details. All right, good morning, Alicia. Wasn't Taylor Swift actually the defendant in this case?
Good morning, Shannon. Yes, she was the defendant in this case, and there's a chance we never would have even heard about this incident if it weren't for David Mueller, the now former Denver radio host who decided to sue Swift because he was fired. Now, here's a photo of that moment when Swift says Mueller reached under her skirt and grabbed her bottom. It was a meet and greet backstage before her concert in Denver in 2013. She countersued Mueller, accusing him of sexual assault and battery. In a statement sent by her publicist shortly after the verdict, Swift said, quote, "I acknowledge the privilege that I benefit from in life, in society, and in my ability to shoulder the enormous cost of defending myself in a trial like this. My hope is to help those whose voices should also be heard." Mueller told the jury he did not grope the singer, that he never would have put his dream job in jeopardy. In the civil case he brought against Swift, he originally asked for $3 million. Swift and her mother, Andrea, who was also named in the suit, Shannon, were embracing at the time of the verdict. Shannon?
Okay, and what she asked for is a judgment. Very symbolic here, Alicia.
Yes, very symbolic. $1, and the jury awarded it. Swift's attorney, Doug Baldridge, commended his client after their victory, explaining what that dollar signifies.
It's a matter of respect and decency. That dollar is a single dollar, and it is of immeasurable value in this ever-going fight for us to figure out where the lines are and what's right and what's wrong.
On the stand, Swift was defiant and confident when confronted by Mueller's attorney, telling him she would not allow him or his client to make it seem as if it was her fault, because she says, Shannon, it wasn't. Shannon?
Alicia Acuna for us in Denver. Thank you very much.
President Trump now speaking out after a new report claiming the Obama team was told about Russia election meddling plans 3 years ago, but reportedly dismissed that warning. We'll check into that story in a moment. Also, rising international tensions putting pressure on the White House. The threats from both Iran and North Korea now front and center.